Welcome back, Mr. Goodberry. The First Star Logistics studio is fully equipped and ready to record.
Welcome back to Bengals on the Brain, presented by First Star Logistics. I'm your host, Joe Goodberry. This is episode 87. We're getting close to 100. We're getting close to almost a full year of doing Bengals on the Brain with First Star Logistics, and I am hoping that it continues. I expect it to continue, but I'm just thinking about 1 year and how fast it's gone, and we're going to hit 100 episodes really quickly here. 87, though. I always liked wearing 87. I was born in 87. Some people may think I'm older or younger than that. I don't know how it goes anymore. When you get to that almost 40 range, I can never tell what people think for your own age. But 87, CJ Uzomah, Andre Caldwell recently, but it's Pat McInally, right? The former punter, wearing 87, but he's also a wide receiver. I think he caught like 53 or 57 balls in his career. He also punted 700 times, so he played both, which is pretty crazy. Mostly a punter, obviously, if you're catching less than 100 balls in a long career for the Bengals. Then only did it sparingly. There is one play, though, I can remember, and I think it was against the Chiefs. Deep ball down the left sideline. Gets absolutely smoked on it, absolutely demolished, and catches a beautiful pass. Very nice. So you can see the talent Pat McInally had. And he was an All-Pro and a Pro Bowl player for the Bengals. So he's the best 87 in franchise history. Yeah, definitely. Anyway, we're going to talk about franchise history a little bit today. We're going to talk about the Ring of Honor. That game was announced. It is going to be the Week 3 Monday Night Football game versus the Washington Commanders. I've been to the 3 Ring of Honor games the Bengals have had so far, which was a Thursday night game in 2021, the year they went to the Super Bowl against the Jacksonville Jaguars, which was an awesome time for me personally. I've talked about that before. The Bengals reached out and sectioned off a section of the end zone where you could buy tickets and sit with me and other social media people. And it was a really good time, really good event. Rolled out the red carpet for us for that. And then the last couple of years, I've been in the First Star Suites. And again, fantastic time every time I can sit there with them and those guys, and just awesome people at First Star, number one. But the suite is a whole other thing. I've never sat in a suite before. So until I met up with the First Star people, it was very foreign to me. And it's probably the best way to catch a game. So if you could ever get a chance to do that, do it. But that was the Dolphins White Tiger game in 2022. And then last year was the, help me out, Rams game. That's right, the Rams game, also Week 3. I do this off memory, if you can't tell, a lot of times. I do keep a notepad and a script, but a lot of times I don't like to look down and look and remember what the next subject was or what I wrote down for the previous day, usually. But it was the Rams game. Remember, we didn't know if Joe Burrow was going to play that week because he re-injured at the end of that Ravens game, Week 2, last season. But the Bengals are 3-0 in those games, all good games. That Jags game was a blast, absolute blast. That was like a coming. It was a rival of that team, that 2021 team, in a lot of ways, because they were down. I want to say it was 14-0 at halftime, and it could have been worse because they got a defensive stop right at the goal line, right as halftime approached. The Jags kind of were being aggressive about it. That also was an era moment for the Jags too, because they left Urban Meyer in Ohio, and he was fired shortly after. But the Bengals put the ball on Joe Burrow's shoulders. That was the first time we really saw him look mobile and healthy again after his knee injury in 2020. The Dolphins game was a lot of fun, other than Tua going down, which was a very scary moment. If you remember that, he got concussed. This is after I think Week 2 was against the Bills, where he got concussed against the Bills, and they said it wasn't a concussion. That started a chain event for the Dolphins a little bit that year. And then last year's game was a really good time because the Bengals got back on track. They ran the ball. And you could tell Burrow wasn't nearly 100%, maybe 50%, but he gutted it out. One of the gutsiest games I remember. But from the Bengals' perspective, if you're considering a game to go to, and you say you can pick one game a year, because I know it's expensive. It's not easy for everyone to get to these games. I would pick the Ring of Honor game. Personally, I think the atmosphere, it's early in the year, number one. So no matter how it goes, even if you're 1-1 or 0-2, which I believe the Bengals have been, was it last year? Yeah. So you can be in a bad situation and be like, all right, this is a must-win game. And I think the atmosphere helps. Not only the Ring of Honor, but prime time. They've won the White Tiger the last 2 years, which if they do it again, and I would expect them to, that brings another element of fun where everyone wears white and the whole stadium and the whole city buys into it, and it looks awesome. But getting there and tailgating and seeing the people that also probably picked this game for the uniqueness and the fun and seeing the old players get inducted into the Bengals Ring of Honor brings fans from all across the country, and that always happens. But like you can feel it and you can see it. Guys that maybe you've met online and talked to other Bengals fans, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm going to the Ring of Honor game." It's like, yeah, that makes sense. That's the game to go to. That is the one. So if you're on the fence about it, that would be the game I would choose. The home opener is always a riot, but Ring of Honor is probably that game to go to, and hopefully I'll be there. Hopefully the first star thing continues, and that our partnership has been great. But I'd like to be at that game if you guys are watching, and I think they are. That week 3 game, I want to be at that one. I want to go over the nominees though and give my take on who I would have voted for. Now I know most people have probably already put in their votes, so I wanted to wait because I wanted to talk to people, see what they were thinking. I keep a list of the greatest Bengals of all time. I'd love to run that series this summer as well. So hopefully that'll give us something to do during the July and maybe early August. Maybe it'll be June more. June and July we should do it because yeah, there's nothing going on football wise. But let's go over the Ring of Honor nominees and some of the process and talk about it a little bit. I've got thoughts on who I would vote for. I'll save to the end. And I've also got thoughts on maybe something they should do a little bit differently. If not this year, fairly soon. So here's the list of the 2024 Bengals Ring of Honor nominees, and we'll start from the top. Corey Dillon, who I think is the best running back in franchise history, played from 97 to 2003. Max Montoya, a guard that started for 10 plus years, 11 years really, 79 to 89. Jim Breech, probably the best kicker in the franchise. Not probably. I know he is kicked for both uh, Super Bowl teams, previous Super Bowl teams, not the current one, obviously. And he is a kicker, so we'll talk about that. David Fulcher from 86 to 92 for the Bengals, probably the shortest tenure of any guy that's on this list. But I will say the guys they brought into the Ring of Honor so far have all been 10 plus year guys. Is that going to keep David Fulcher off this list much longer? I should say it's already kept him off, a few years now. Lemar Parrish, who played for the Bengals from 1970 to 1977, the corner, who was absolutely fantastic. And I think if he didn't split his career between the Bengals and the Washington franchise, he probably would be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. James Brooks, if not the best running back in franchise history, if that goes to Corey Dillon, probably the second best running back in franchise history. He played from the Bengals from 84 to 91. Tim Krumrie, the nose tackle that was the heart and soul of that Bengals defense from 83 to 1994. One of my favorite players when I was a kid, and I thought, this is the pinnacle of defensive performance. He played till 94, and so I was a young man, but I used to watch a lot of football history, and I thought Krumrie was the absolute man. Bob Trumpy from 68 to 77 probably would have been a Hall of Fame tight end had he have had a great quarterback to play with. If Greg Cook would have stayed healthy, maybe he would have, but what a great player he was. And then Cris Collinsworth from 81 to 88. Short career, but has lasted and been a face in Cincinnati and around pro football for a long time afterwards. Obviously, he's a announcer still, but owner of Pro Football Focus and was a great player. I think he was one of the rookies of the year because there was different voting back then. But also, played in the Super Bowl for the Bengals as well. Dave Lapham and Reggie Williams being the last two. Reggie Williams was a longtime linebacker from the Bengals from 76 to 89. I'm saving Dave Lapham for now because I think the conversation should start with Dave Lapham. And not just because I'm, his partner now, I guess, in the First Star Media family. But he has, so I feel like I know him because I've met him, I've worked with him, and I found out he's just an awesome dude, honestly. and I'm sure a lot of people have met him because he's always around. But a lot of people probably feel like they know Dave, and they Lap is the voice of the Bengals and the narrator of the Bengals, and just a great illustrator and storyteller of your memories for the last 30 years in Cincinnati. And it's almost unfair to put him amongst these other players while Dave had a long career and was a very good player, obviously. To play that long and start that long in the NFL is not easy. So he was a good player in his own right. But when compared to a lot of these other guys, if you're just voting on their playing careers, he's going to get lost in the shuffle, I think, or could be. And I think a lot of people aren't going to just vote based on these players' careers, and they're going to vote with the players that have meant something to them, the people that have meant something to them. And I think Dave Lapham, when you start to consider that and consider the impact he's had on Bengals fans and the franchise over his entire life at this point, since he left college, since he graduated from Syracuse and began playing football or at a professional level, he has been known for being in Cincinnati and being part of the Bengals and being such a huge impact on how we see this team, this franchise, take in the game, learn the game, and enjoy the game. So I would say that if he doesn't get voted in, if we're not voting based on all of the contributions outside of football, and I think and the thing is because Corey Dillon's the top guy on that list that we just looked at, and I think he's got a great shot of getting in. But some people are not going to vote for him. Talking to people the last 2 weeks, people are not going to vote for him for the way his career ended and how he left, how he threw his pads into the stands and ultimately demanded a trade and got out of Cincinnati. And I think the general perception of him during his playing career wasn't, personality wise, wasn't the highest. So if we're going to knock Corey Dillon for that, or if you are going to, if you're one of those people that will, and I'm not, like, that's a whole other conversation, and maybe we'll get to that in a second here because I do want to talk about these other players a little bit more in depth. If you're going to knock a player for those things, then you need to give a guy like Dave Lapham his flowers and give him credit for being the exact opposite, right? And being an ambassador and being a representation of the fan in the booth, right? Or in the franchise and behind those walls, and giving us so much insight into what the team is doing and thinking and has done, and the analysis and everything that goes into it. But if he doesn't get in, and was the point I was going to get to, there almost needs to be a special consideration for Lap, because it's almost unfair to put him against Corey Dillon and Lemar Parrish and Bob Trumpy and Tim Krumrie. And honestly, the entire list is so deserving and should all get into the Bengals Ring of Honor, that Dave should already be in my opinion. Lap should be in because you almost want to put contributors in. Like the first year when they were like Munoz and Paul Brown are in, we're not even going to vote on them. Now, they would have been voted in, so maybe they saw that as more of a formality. So let's just get it done and then get the next set of players in. I get that. But for me, Lapham, if he retired today, the Bengals should just put him in. And I don't think it requires him retiring. I just think like an event like that would get it done. But we should do it before that. We shouldn't leave it up to the Bengals, right? But the whole Ring of Honor thing should have started 25 years ago anyways. And instead, maybe longer than that, it is 2024 already. So if it was 1999 when this started, that could have been fair, I guess. Mid-90s after the second Super Bowl team, 5 years after that. Because what is the waiting time? You look at this list, and the most recent player on this list is Corey Dillon. He's got a lot of years he could wait and still enjoy it as a young man getting inducted into the Cincinnati Bengals Ring of Honor. Some of these guys are older. Some of these guys need to see it now. The Bob Trumpies, the Lemar Parrishes, even Dave and Tim Krumrie, and guys, that played in the 70s. Reggie Williams played in the 70s. Last few years of it. But point being is, do we want to go with the older players first? Do we want to say best players first? Because I see some people discussing, and I've seen some back and forth, and people are like, I'm just going to vote for the best player, who I thought was the best players. I want the best players in the Ring of Honor. And I'm not going to argue against you on that at all. I think that is a fair process. The process is different for everyone, I think. How did the player make you feel? How is his legacy, and not just in the Bengals, but around the NFL? Can it help this guy get this guy into the Hall of Fame? Look at Ken Riley. I think getting the Ring of Honor set up and getting him in there helped get him into the Hall of Fame. Of course it did. You look at the history. If you're an NFL history guy and look at the Hall of Fame and see how local honors and franchise honors impact your ability to get into the Hall of Fame, it does. Ken Riley got in right after. And I don't think like Dave Lapham is going to get into the NFL Hall of Fame, obviously. But guys like Lemar Parrish, guys like Corey Dillon that are probably on the cusp or right underneath, we don't want to forget about them. We want to get them in there. We want to give them that chance to maybe get into the conversation. So if that was your argument and I kind of just made it, then I would get it and I would understand it and I'd be for it. But at the same time, I think you can do a blend. And so far they've done this. So far I think the fans have gotten it correct. So like to not like discredit or persuade you in any way, because I think Bengals fans are nailing it so far with obviously Munoz and Paul Brown to start it, but with Ken Riley and Kenny Anderson, with Willie Anderson, with Chad Ochocinco, Chad Johnson, with Isaac Curtis, Boomer Esiason. These are the correct players, in my opinion. And I keep a list, and that's I want to do the greatest players in Bengals history. I really want to do this as a long-running segment. But so far, the top players are in there, and I wonder, because now I've got one eye on the players that are coming up. The Geno Atkins, the Andrew Whitworth, the AJ Greens. Those are top 10 players in franchise history, in my opinion. Top 15 at the very least. Whitworth and Atkins, to me, are top 5 or 6 players in franchise history. So do we have to wait 10 years until they're retired? If we say 2022, do we have to wait till 2032? And how far can we get over the next 7 or so years if we go 2 players per year? Can we get 14 players in there? When does it start to slow down? Does it slow down after 5 more years and we go to 1 player after that? So do we have 10 more players to go and then we start to go 1 player a year after that? If that's the case, we may be cutting down this list a little bit. And that if that's the case, when does Jim Breech make it in? I understand he was great and he kicked for a long time and he was clutch, but he's a kicker. And I think he'll make it. So like I always hate this. This is like when we debate Hall of Fame finalists and they're all worthy, or when we debate top 5, who's the best, rank the top 5 players in this draft, they're all worthy, but you still got to debate them and rank them a little bit. How would you have these guys? Who did you vote for? I really want to know in the comments, and I really want to have this discussion. I would love for them to just put Dave Lapham in and then allow us to vote on the players, because I think we are all accepting and taking in consideration his post-playing career and the impact he's had. Is it fair to say he's had more of an impact post-playing than he did playing? I think it is. And I don't think that's a discredit or anything to be ashamed of. I think that clearly goes into his legacy and why Bengals fans will vote for him and eventually get him into the Ring of Honor. He's a lock to make the Ring of Honor. And you may have to tell people outside of Cincinnati why he's in the ring, and you'd be like, oh, because he's the man, and because he's represented us in the booth and in the amongst the franchise for years now, decades. So I would love if it's not this year, like and I said I would vote for. To go back a minute, when I said the Bengals fans have gotten it correct, I like so far that it feels like we've gotten one older era player and one newer era. And when I say newer, I mean like guys like Chad, that was 05, Willie Anderson, 05 era team. That was 20 years ago, guys. So like Geez, it's you're talking about 80s players, 70s and 80s players, and then 90s and 2000s players. And we've done one of each for the most part. And if we do that again, I would go Corey Dillon and Lemar Parrish because Corey Dillon's the only option for the newer era. So maybe he can wait. But I think, in my opinion, the next best player is Lemar Parrish, who was a corner and return man, consistently scored touchdowns, made 8 Pro Bowls in his career, 6 Pro Bowls in his first 8 years in the league, 8 years with Cincinnati, 6 Pro Bowls. Can you imagine that now? Every DB in history that has 7+ Pro Bowls is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He has 8. He's the only one not in. This is like the Ken Riley conversation when he was the only guy with like 50+ interceptions that wasn't in the Hall of Fame. Lemar Parrish is the only dude, only DB, safeties and corners with 7+ Pro Bowls, and he's got 8 of them that isn't in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And some of those were as a returner, but like deservingly, he made the Pro Bowl as a return man because he was fantastic. Still, he was so good. And when you talk to like older Bengals fans, and I've done this when we're having the Ken Riley conversation, and some of them were like, I think Lemar Parrish was better. And I didn't this was 5 to 10 years ago. We've been having this conversation about getting Ken Riley in. And some people would like whisper that I thought Lemar Parrish was better. I thought they threw at Ken Riley so much because Parrish was so locked down, or because Parrish was so dangerous that if he got his hand on the ball, he was going to score. It's a guy that returned a lot of touchdowns, interceptions, fumbles, kicks, punts, blocked field goals. He has a blocked field goal for a touchdown against the Bills, I want to say. Just dangerous to throw against. So they started throwing Riley's way more. And Riley had the ball skills, was making people pay. I mean, what a duo. One of the best duos of all time. And the Bengals don't have a lot of defensive players in the Ring of Honor. It's just Ken Riley. And even the guys coming up, Tim Krumrie, David Fulcher, obviously Lemar Parrish. I'm missing one, Reggie Williams. But like Fulcher, Krumrie, I think locks to make it. I think Reggie Williams is too because he played for so long. But like I don't think he's as good as Krumrie and Fulcher were. Fulcher probably best for a shorter amount of time, maybe just the most dynamic and the most new as in like that Dick LeBeau zone blitz was new and it was devastating. And the way they used him was so dynamic and versatile that he was rare. It was something the league hasn't seen at the time. And then now we see these versatile safety / linebackers / move them around chess pieces on defense. We see these guys. But David Fulcher was doing that when it was like, whoa, what is that? Where is he lining up? What is he doing? Is he dropping in coverage? Is he blitzing? Is he a linebacker? Is he a safety? What is happening? So these are like legendary players we're talking about on this list. Max Montoya, fantastic guard that played for a long time for the Bengals. He actually comes out on my list where I try to factor in how long they played, how many games they played for the Bengals, how good they were, how many Pro Bowls and All Pros and other honors and legacy and everything that goes into this formula that spits it out. Max Montoya actually comes out. It's Lemar Parrish and then Montoya as the next best player. So, let's not forget him. Bob Trumpy, I talked about he may be a Hall of Famer had he had a quarterback. Compares to Mike Ditka in a lot of ways and for stats at tight end. And that's a guy who's in the Hall of Fame, probably because of his post-playing days, but Trumpy was a voice and a personality as well, post-playing. A guy that was explosive downfield. There's a game against the Chiefs, absolutely destroys him. I think there's a highlight of it or a cut-up of it on YouTube. And he's just 70-yard touchdown, 50-yard touchdown. They couldn't touch him. He's averaging 22 yards per catch with Greg Cook at quarterback. I think that was the year. Fantastic player. They're all so good. So when I say I would go Parrish and Dillion, I could be swayed mostly on Dillion. Parrish, to me, needs to be the next guy in. I'd love to just do a cut-up. And maybe if we do the top 100 players, greatest players in Bengals history, that's when I'll have cut-ups. I've watched a lot of old Bengals games over the last like 4 years now. It's what I do during the summer. If I could do it here and just enjoying them with you, that'd be fun if we don't get flagged from YouTube for doing that. I'd like to do that. We can do like live watching, like line up like a couple old games. Let's just live watch. Friday night, we're going to be here 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock, Bengals on the Brain, grab a drink. We're going to watch the 1988 playoffs versus the Buffalo Bills. I guess it was 89 at the time, January. But that'd be fun. And we can get an appreciation for these older players that I think, should not be forgotten. And that's why I felt so strongly about them having the Ring of Honor. I'm sure many of you did. Because I enjoy pro football history. I enjoy the Bengals history. I've done a lot to try and catch up on it and have my own opinions on these players and actually view these players with my own eyes. And Bengals fans have gotten it right. So I don't want to be on a stage here or a soapbox here preaching about who you should vote for. I want to know who you're voting for. I want to know your feelings. And if you're an older fan, especially, I want to know. This is your time. This is your time to tell us about these guys. Let's get around the campfire. Let's listen to your stories. Leave them in the comments. Let us know who you're voting for and which of these guys may be being overlooked and underrated. Especially before I get to the greatest Bengals of all time. This has been Bengals on the Brain, presented by First Star Logistics. I'm your host, Joe Goodberry, for episode 87. Until next time, Hooday.
Dave Lapham here, and every day I am grateful for my experience to have played professional football. As a player, I realize self-motivation, leadership, and appreciating your teammates are key. At First Star Logistics, you can use those same attributes to create the life you want for you and your family. Build your future by working hard like I did. You'll see results both on and off the field. Call First Star Logistics today and be part of our winning team.
Opportunity knocking.